Welcome to Journaling with Nature, the podcast for those who want to turn curiosity into wonder, a pencil sketch into a rabbit hole of discovery, a moment of stillness into a life full of joy. I'm your host, Bethan Burton. Let's open the pages of our nature journals and explore this world together. Hello, this is episode 91. So we're only a few days away from International Nature Journaling Week 2022, which is the 1st to the 7th of June. The buzz is happening now, people are posting things online in anticipation, and the program is set and it's up on the website. Our theme this year is back to basics. We're trying to keep it simple and show that this practice can be done close to home with simple materials and that it's for everyone. Everyone who wants to feel connected with nature and the present moment, everyone who would like to understand their world more deeply, and everyone who'd like to bring more joy into their lives. So if this sounds like you, please do join in with us. Visit the website naturejournalingweek.com for more information on how to participate and sign up to the newsletter so that you get notified of everything that's going on during the week. So today is a treat for me to have the chance to share with you another interview with an Australian nature journaler. This time I'm speaking with ecologist Henrietta Mooney. Henrietta is the founder of the Hunter Region Field Naturalists and Nature Journaling Club and is committed to using nature journaling as a tool for conservation. In our conversation, we speak about Henrietta's history of science and working as an ecologist and how she's now letting her heart take the lead a little more. Let's listen. Thank you so much for joining me.
No worries. Thanks for having me. It's nice to talk to you face to face after all this time.
Yes, I know. It's lovely to connect.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So I always start from the beginning and I talk about my guests' early nature experiences, and I wonder if nature's been part of your life from the beginning.
Yeah, I think it has, and I think even memories I had when I was 3 years old, I can remember feeling very connected to nature. And whether or not that's when you're 3 years old and you're much closer to the ground, little. So it's almost like you see everything like a small animal would see everything. So yeah, very much. And as I got older, my dad used to take us on adventures every weekend. We'd be, out somewhere and in the country, and so I think I was just always immersed in it. But I always felt quite a deep connection to nature from the very beginning. Yeah, and I have memories when I was young and even in primary school where I just felt innately connected, to nature and felt almost protected by it, I think. Yeah.
Tell me about that feeling of feeling protected by nature.
Yeah, I had an incident I remember when I was in primary school, which I loved. And I was just walking by myself during lunchtime, and there wasn't a lot of nature around, but it was near the coast. And yeah, I just felt like something was looking after me. And um, I had a few insects fly in front of me, and I remember like they were hovering there for some time, and I was looking at them, and it was almost like someone was stopped to speak to me, and I just thought it was so lovely, and it just made me feel happy. I didn't really understand what that meant, but it just made me feel very elated and very happy. And yeah, and even later on, when I started working in the field as an ecologist, I had moments with my workmates who became friends, where very memorable moments where we'd observe something like a lyrebird underneath the ferns in the forest, and we never had to say anything to each other. We just looked at each other and thought, wow, wasn't that amazing, And so I've had wonderful memories and experiences like that. Yeah.
A moment of shared wonder with your colleagues. That's really special.
Mm.
Was it very natural this lead into becoming an ecologist? Did you know from the beginning what you wanted to do with your professional life?
Uh, Not so much because I was very focused on music performance. So I thought that's what I would do was I'd become a musician, and I worked towards all that. But then when that didn't work out, when I left school, I realized that all the things I was good at school, where I got really high marks and high achievement, was in science and
Mm.
geography and biology. And so I followed that um, path, and I had a year off after school, and I found myself by pure accident um, in university studying social ecology, which I didn't get enough marks at school to get into university at all. And I went and talked to a professor there at which used to be Hawkesbury Agricultural College in Western Sydney, and um, I went and talked to the professor about getting into his course, even though I didn't have any marks to get into it. And at the end of the conversation with him, he just picked a book off the shelf, which I still have now. And he said, "Okay, well, take this book, go home and read it, and we'll see you on the 1st of February when class starts." And I thought, "Oh, okay, I'm in. Like, I'm in university," which was a very unusual way to get in. And it was life changing, the course that I did. So, and that did set me on a fairly not clear path, but it set me on that path for life then. And when I was studying social ecology, they taught us about deep ecology, which
Mhm.
is very much sort of like nature journaling is for me now.
Can you describe a little about deep ecology?
Yeah, well, in its formal sense, when we learnt about it at university, it was looking at people like an author called Starhawk, another one called Joanna Macy, and they all wrote about the human connection to nature and described it not so much as reconnecting with nature, but recognizing the connection you already have. And
Mm.
quite powerful um, well, philosophy, I suppose, at the time to learn. And I was so lucky I learnt it at such a young age too. Um, just some of the beautiful writings of Joanna Macy had a real impact on me as well. And yeah, it was sort of the start of seeing nature in a completely different way for most people, but for me, I thought, well, that connection's easy because I've already had that. But to have it sort of written and formalized by other people was um, affirming that actually this is a real thing. It's not just sort of me, and it's not just a philosophy that you learn at uni. It's actually is something that other people feel as well. Yeah, so I ended up majoring in deep ecology during my science degree.
Oh, wow.
I was very lucky to be able to do that.
That's an amazing story. The story of meeting the professor and him just seeing something in you. What do you think happened? He just recognized that you would be a valuable part of this course, or the course would be valuable to you?
Yeah, and I think it was the first year of the course, so it was a brand new course, and so it was a bit experimental as well. So I guess he probably in his mind he was looking for a variety of people from different backgrounds to um, see how it would work and see how the course would develop. So we were very much involved in the course development as well
Mhm.
as it went on. So it was a bit of a social experiment for all of us, actually. But it was very joyful and, yeah, very sort of very deep connection with it not just being a university degree, it was a whole lot more than that as we went through the course together. Yeah. So I'm not exactly sure what the professor saw in me, but it it must have just been the way I described my connection to nature, and he thought, well, that's what we're trying to do in a formal education sense. So
Yes, and how incredible that this deep ecology focus really affirmed something that you knew,
Mm,
sounds like, from when you were very, very young, maybe from the beginning, when you were 3 years old and have those first memories.
mm,
It was affirming that. It wasn't teaching you anything necessarily, but just saying, "Yeah, okay, I am connected. I have this inside me."
mm. And once I felt that sort of more formalized connection, then I knew I would never let it go, so that was it, and that's how it was sort of life-changing, in that I thought, "Well, this is something you can never let go of because it is part of you," so mm.
Yeah, what a beautiful story. And how did nature journaling come into your life?
Well, formally later on, actually, in the last few years, but funnily enough, when I look at my career in ecology and doing field surveys, I think, well, I've been doing this already, but the way I describe it to people who come to our nature journaling sessions, is that I used to do surveys walking through the bush, and it would all be botanical and scientific names of plants and animals, and you'd just be ticking things off a list. So it was very much based on words, and identification, and just recording everything on words. I do a bit of mapping, but otherwise it would be, yes, I saw this species and this many, and so it was all about numbers and words. And when I came to nature journaling, I thought, oh gosh, this is what I've been doing all along, but
Mm,
not in pictures yet, but in numbers and words. And but I also felt that although it's been a wonderful career, um, having names on a piece of paper weren't meaningful enough for me. So nature journaling actually gave me the meaning to what I was doing for work, funnily enough. Because sometimes you're doing surveys for areas that are going to become, say, a carbon offset for something else. And so the work can be very challenging on a values basis.
mm,
And um, and I think I was doing a survey on an area of bushland where a freeway was going to go through. And I thought, I just want to take a mental picture of all this before it's destroyed. And so I think that's what sparked my change from working full time as an ecologist and moving into more nature journaling is I need to capture the beauty of nature in all its forms now, and let go of what we can't save, and actually um, appreciate what we have and try and bring more awareness to what we can save through nature journaling. So I think that's where the tipping point where I changed. I thought I don't want to do this full time anymore, and I moved sort of closer towards nature journaling, which I sort of do half the time now. And yeah, so being an ecologist and nature journaling go together really well. But to me, nature journaling has become much more a meaningful and purposeful activity, much more than my work used to feel for me. So, mm,
that's so interesting, and I have often thought about this because, I studied ecology at university as well and kept field journals, and I'm so interested in this distinction between a nature journal and a field journal, and are they the same? Are they different? And I hear that you're saying you used much more words and numbers in your field journal, and also maybe that there was a level of personal meaning that is in your nature journal that wasn't there in a field journal. Is that right?
well, it's evolving that way, yes. And when I first started um, teaching or doing workshops on nature journaling, I did start from a very scientific perspective, and and that's partly because I also studied natural history illustration, which is very scientific based, and so it sort of evolved over time into something much nicer. but I'm finding now more and more as we do workshops and have outdoor sessions that it's very much changing, and I'm moving further away from the scientific recording into something quite different, and something that's just about um, beauty and the sounds, um, and listening and being more present. And also, having worked with First Nations people through my work for some time, it's almost becoming like their inter- their feeling about being on country. So that's what it's becoming more for me, is that being on country and listening, and see what comes of that listening. And so that's what it's becoming more like that now. And my nature journal itself is becoming less about scientific drawings and scientific recordings, and more about um, yeah, how I feel being on country in my own way, and how I feel being in nature. So, and yeah, there's just such a variety of ways to do nature journaling. So there's no right or wrong. It's just that's my personal journey. Moving more away from the scientific recording. But some people love to do it that way, and I think it's fantastic for people to learn how to record things more scientifically like that too, because that's also important, and they're important records, like for the future.
Yes, I agree that there are just so many different reasons and so many different ways, and everyone has their own way. And I love what you said about sitting in the landscape and listening
Mm,
without bringing our own stuff to the process, just listening what's here
mm,
and not necessarily listening with your ears, though that it can be that, but listening with our whole selves, what the land is telling us is really powerful and important.
mm, mm.
Can you tell me about the landscape where you are? What does your region look like?
Yes. Well, I'm in Newcastle in the Hunter Valley, so I'm closer to the coast. So we have an area near the coast called Awabakal Nature Reserve, and Awabakal is our um, um, that's the land that we're on in this area, and it's beautiful coastal heathland. So in
Mm,
spring, there's just millions of wildflowers all packed in together, and you're just literally walking through a field of flowers, which is incredible. And I just love that sort of environment. So
wow.
that has to be my favorite. um, but with our club, we travel all over the Hunter Valley. So we might venture through box gum grassy woodlands, which are also really beautiful and have completely different set of trees and plants and animals that have their habitat there. Yeah, so I like exploring new places and learning as I go as well.
Oh, wow. Your description of the wildflowers just makes my heart skip. I just love that these wildflowers are just there, like you say, like you're walking through a garden almost, but
Yeah,
it's natives.
yeah, and I don't know if you've ever seen a field of flannel flowers.
I haven't, but flannel flowers are absolutely fascinating. Can you describe it for me?
They're they're just so soft. They're like rabbit's ears. Like all the whole foliage is covered in fine, soft hairs. And when you see a field of them, all I feel like doing is just leaping and jumping straight into them, like to a fern forest. And you think it would be a soft landing. Want to jump into it and just land in this field of flannel flowers. It's so beautiful and soft. So that's what I feel like every time I see the field of them.
That's incredible. I love that image. Wow. So you started the Hunter Region Field Naturalists and Nature Journaling Club, and I'd love to hear about your experience of starting this club.
Yeah, well, I I could see that there was other people that had similar interests to me, and it started with just a couple of friends and a couple of people I went to uni with, and we just started it as a social thing. Like we just thought, well, we're just going to go to a what we call this weekend. Does anybody want to come? And so it's evolved from there quite quickly, in that a lot of people want to come along and want to learn more about what nature journaling is all about. And so we started the club so that we could meet up on regular weekends. So we sort of set the fourth Saturday of every month. We thought, okay, that's when we'll all meet up. And then we just started extending the invitation out for other people to join us. And so we've met people who we would not have met normally, who have started coming along. And the idea of it too was, for people who were interested in art, some arts societies and clubs can be very intimidating if
Mm.
you're not an artist, but you really want to try and you really just want to do something creative. So the motivation behind starting it was to provide a platform and a nice social creative atmosphere for people, that where it was there's no expectations and it wasn't intimidating space to do art in. It was just, let's just do nature journaling together, and we're not aiming to do artworks. We're just aiming to connect with nature and whatever creative form you would like to use to document your feelings and your experience of being in nature. So it was, and I think that's why it's become so popular, is because people can come along, and even if they've got no art experience at all, they can just come along and join in, and we learn from each other. So um, there's no expectation and no formula that anybody has to follow. It's just, this is what we do, and if you'd like to learn how to use watercolors or pastels, well, that person can help you with that. And oh, I can teach you a little bit about watercolor, and some people like using pencils. So we sort of all become teachers in the group in a way, because we're all teaching something each other, something new. And some people do really love to use, poetry and things like that. So
Mm.
there's a couple of people that are just so wonderful at poetry when they're in nature, that they share that with us, and we're learning, oh wow, this is, we could write poetry as well in our nature journals. So it's been a lovely thing to simply just provide the platform for people to come along, and then it's just sort of happened. So because I'm not a natural leader or a natural organizer, and I'm not particularly outwardly social person either. So to have started this club, and it's become a wonderful social group as well, as much as anything, it's just wonderful, because I feel like all I've done is just provide the platform, and if people like it, they'll keep coming along, and just leaving it very open. But um, yeah, and everybody just brings their own form of a nature journal along, and their own medium. Some people just bring a pencil, and that's all they want to do, and that's wonderful too. So um, I personally love to use watercolor, and so I even write sometimes in watercolor just because I'm so used to using that.
Yes.
So everybody uses a different medium for recording in their nature journal, which is lovely. And we get ideas from each other. Somebody will find something, a method that's really nice, and we think, oh, well, we might try that. Yeah, so it's been really lovely to see that group evolve and just be open to anybody. So open for anyone who would like to try, or would like to come along. And we have members that have limited mobility too, so they can't always come on nature journaling adventures when we go for bushwalks. But we try and balance it so that we have, we might have a one that involves a bit of bushwalking on one session, and then the next session we might meet somewhere that's really accessible. So it might be somewhere that's easy to get to on transport. And people, members of sort of, we've organised carpooling for people who don't drive, and so we wanted to sort of make it accessible for people of all ages and abilities, to feel welcome to come along and supported to come along. So that's been really lovely. So we've got this huge age range from 8 to 80 coming along Mhm.
That sounds amazing. And I love that as an example to others who might not have a load of experience or even an organizing sort of personality, that you have put that out there and said, here, we're gonna do this thing, and then the community has flocked around, and now you've got a social group, you've got a group of people who love the same thing and are really ready to share,
Mhm.
and you're learning from each other, and that you're making it accessible to a whole range of people is beautiful.
Mm. And we will have our very first nature journaling retreat weekend in September this year,
Tell me about that.
organising. So, one of our group members has a beautiful bushland retreat area that's often used for yoga retreats and um, for spiritual groups or church groups, things like that. And so, and she offered us, mates rates for having a retreat there. So we thought, well, we have to do this. It's just such a beautiful idea. So we've organised, to have a nature journaling retreat. So, um, and everybody's sort of contributing. So I've sort of organised the venue and accommodation for everybody and all the catering, and um, lots of people have offered to teach something that they like doing. So one person likes just drawing with a plain graphite pencil, so she's
Mhm.
going to teach us how to do botanical illustration and um, creating form and shadows and things using just a pencil. And then another person is loves doing watercolor paintings of birds. So she's going to teach a session on how we can do watercolor birds. Yeah, so we've got people have just volunteered to teach something, to share something, which is wonderful because um, I'm not actually going to teach anything, which is marvelous because I'm looking for other people to step in. So I'm actually going to teach yoga one morning of the retreat, and that's it. And
That sounds really magical.
yeah, so it should be lovely. So, and it's already fully booked. So we put it out there to the members of the club, and I was going to put it out to the general public as well, anyone who was interested. But it actually booked out with people that are already connected to the club. So already booked out, and it's only not even June.
That's amazing. Oh, congratulations. That sounds really, really fun.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm sure it'll be lovely, and everybody was just so keen to do it, and just to have a weekend with each other where we're
Yes.
immersed in a natural environment, and there'll be time for people to do their own silent sort of nature journaling if they'd rather just have some time out for themselves. And then there's other times where we'll do structured sessions, but people can come in and out of whatever session they like. So it's sort of fairly casual.
Yeah. I can hear lots of birds song behind you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I live right next to a area of bushland, so we do get a lot of birds, which is lovely. Yeah.
That's so nice. So when you go out on your nature journaling adventures, you mentioned watercolor. I'm wondering what you like to keep in your kit.
Yes, I just have a small nature journal, about an A5 nature journal, and I do have a big elaborate watercolor kit because um, every time I discover a new color, I think, oh, I have to add that to my journal. So most people carry this really small little watercolor set with about 12 colors, and I carry one with about 30 in them. Um, which is actually makes it harder in the field because you've got more choice of colors.
Yes.
Whereas I did learn how to just nature journal with three colors. That's how we were taught at college, how to just take some of the primary colors and create everything you need from that. So I do know how to do that, but when there's such a choice of watercolor paints, I can't help myself. So I have a lot. So my journal's about this big, and my
The palette's bigger than the journal.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Sometimes I just travel with watercolor pencils
Mhm.
because that's a lot easier, obviously, just to take a little bag of watercolor pencils and a water pen, um, and when I teach workshops, sometimes that's all I use, particularly if it's sort of a short workshop of only like an hour or something. I just use watercolor pencils because I think that's the easiest method people are sort of used to. So
Mm. And you have talking about color, you have this lovely idea of creating what you call a color library at the front of your journal, and it's essentially taking notes on color. I'd love to hear you talk about your color library.
yeah, that's something I I think creating a color palette of any kind, whether it's pencils or paints, is actually just a really nice activity to do. So
Mm.
it's quite meditative just to do little swatches of all the colors that you have in your kit. And so it's a good introduction for people who have never used watercolor or watercolor pencils, is to just create this beautiful colored page of just squares or circles or whatever. But then it became a really useful tool that I realized once I had it in the front of my nature journal, then I could flip back to it and refer to it while I was in the field. And the other reason too is because your pencils and watercolor paints, they look very different when they dry. And so you sort of almost need to do a sample of each of the colors, because otherwise you might look like you've got a palette of all browns and blacks, but in actual fact there's a huge range in that. um, yeah, so that's the main reason I do it, and I share that in workshops for that reason, that if you're going to take out just a small amount of colored pencils or something, if you have it there in the front of your journal, then you know what colors you've got. You don't have to sort of guess what your pencils will come out like.
Yeah.
You can sort of create endless amount of color combinations from whatever you have. And so every time you discover a new color by accident, you just add that to your color library. So it's sort of become a useful tool as well as a very nice meditative thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a lovely idea, and a page of color swatches is so pretty in my eyes.
Yeah.
For you, do you predominantly nature journal in the field, or do you have a mixture of like studio and field practice?
Mainly in the field, and that's probably because I have easy access to natural areas. So I'm lucky in that way. And also just because we like going out bushwalking. So there's plenty of opportunities to do that. Um, the one thing I have done in recent years is nature journal on holidays. So my husband is very good photographer, and so that's his hobby. He does a lot of photography while we're on holidays, and I'm just happy to sit in a on the coast or in a bit of scenery or a little bit of bushland and just sit and paint. So, and it's the same thing. It's capturing a moment in time. He does it in terms of photography, and I do it in terms of nature journaling. So it's sort of creating holiday memories, which is nice to sort of go back over sometimes. You think, oh yeah, I remember, seeing that plant or that bird that I don't get to see at home. So yeah, I do it much more on holidays, and than I used to, and yeah, mainly in the field. Some of our nature journaling sessions, like in winter, we go to. There's a couple of cafes we go to when the weather is not so good, but they happen to be cafes that have. One of them has a florist shop in it, and another one is completely covered in indoor green plants. So if we can't go out because the weather's no good, we go to these places because
Yes,
the florist shop actually lets us sit there and have our coffee and paint and draw the
the flowers.
flower arrangement. So it's still sort of a little bit of nature, but indoors if we have to be. Yeah,
That's lovely.
yeah.
And I really love that idea of going with your husband and in your own creative ways, capturing your experiences of nature and then being able to see from each other's point of view what you saw and what I saw and compare those.
Mm,
It's really special.
yeah, yeah, and it really connects you with the place that you're in, whether it's close to home or interstate or
Yeah.
yeah.
Back in February, you were involved with something called the Art of Nature Journaling, and it sounds like an amazing event, and I'd love to hear your words about it.
Ah, yes, that was, something we did as a club. So there was 11 members of the club involved in that, and it was an exhibition, at, the Hunter Wetland Centre. And the Hunter Wetland Centre, it's, internationally listed wetland, like it's a Ramsar wetland site. And so beautiful place to visit. And we have done nature journaling there. And they just have a small gallery space, in the interpretive centre at the front. And so we applied to have an exhibition there, which I knew was very different from what they usually do. They usually have very much polished, finished artworks on display.
Mhm.
So we weren't sure if they'd sort of be into what we were doing. But they accepted, I think, because they were more curious than anything. And so we were given a month, to have an exhibition, and it was essentially an exhibition of nature journaling. So um, all of us had our nature journal page open to a book open to a particular page, and we had some separate pages and framed works, which were essentially just sketches or watercolor library swatches and everything you sort of think of with nature journaling, we had on display. So um, the gallery was obviously used to having artworks that were all for
Mhm.
sale, and ours were actually not. Um, that wasn't our focus to sell artworks. Our focus was to share nature journaling and, to capture an audience of other people who might not have heard of it before, or might not even know what it's about. And so, yeah, we had rough sketches. We had some soundscapes, which were very, interpretive art, where people had just painted, sort of like a graph in color to map the sound of a bird. We had all sorts of different things. So we just left it open for everybody to just put whatever works that they felt connected to in the exhibition. And so we had this huge variety of works, and the gallery sees about 800 people or something in a month on average in the gallery. So we thought, wow, that's 800 people that we might expose to nature journaling who might be interested in taking it up too.
Yeah.
And so, and the gallery was surprisingly, I was a bit worried about their, take on what we were doing, because it wasn't a standard exhibition type thing. But it was really well received, by the gallery, and really well received by the public. We had some really wonderful comments, and all of us who were involved had we just go to the exhibition space for a couple of hours, every day, so that there was someone there to talk to people about what we were doing in nature journaling. So we connected with a lot of people, and yeah, we've since got quite a few club members joining us after that, because um, they'd never heard of nature journaling before, and they were really keen to try. So that's a lovely outcome, and that's
Yeah.
all we wanted to do, was to encourage other people to do it. Yeah.
What a wonderful way to share this practice with a wider audience and introduce people who may not have known what it was all about.
Mm. It was for us to share the love around.
Yes, absolutely. So you've done workshops with Landcare and other community groups on the subject of nature journaling for conservation. I'd love to hear you talk about this overlap between nature journaling and conservation efforts.
Mm. Yeah, so I the first workshop I did was with Lake Macquarie council, and they have their own land care department, which is wonderful. And when I discussed it with council about what we do and how that fits in with, they were doing a backyard bush care program, and they were encouraging residents in that area to record what birds, plants, and animals they had in their backyard and feed it into the iNaturalist app. And so they saw the correlation between what we were doing and what they wanted to encourage, not just land carers, but just people, residents at home, is to record what species they have. And so I came into um, a little bit of science and a little bit of nature journaling combined. So I sort of taught them about um, the basics of how to recognize calls of birds or the tracks that you might see of animals that leave behind. A lot of species that you don't actually see, you can hear, but you don't actually ever see them, especially nocturnal animals.
Yeah.
So it was helping them with their recording of what they have in their backyard or their land care site and using nature journaling to do that. And it was good fun because most of the participants in the workshops had never really drawn since they were at school. And for them, it seemed to be a very joyful experience to learn how to record the plants and animals in their backyard, but in a creative way by learning how to draw them. So, and that was really lovely. And the other thing I wanted to encourage them to do was to also see it as a scientific record of the plants and animals that they were seeing on their site or in their backyard, because that's what council was interested in, that sort of data as well. And so we were sort of helping council keep on top of the scientific data they needed for conservation works. And so it became a bit of a citizen science activity. So the combination of that really worked well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Helping people understand their place and what's around them in a deeper way is so important for conservation.
Mm,
Even like you say, having a knowledge and a map of sorts of what's around us is
mm,
super valuable.
mm. Yeah, and since those workshops, a couple of land care groups and a couple of individuals have continued on and actually created a species list of their area just based on their nature journaling, which
Wow.
is such a wonderful thing. And there was also families involved, so young kids and their parents. And I thought that's the most wonderful thing to do together as a family. And so I just found that quite uplifting, sort of having these people take it on as a family as well. So I thought, oh, well, that's something beautiful that they can do together. Mm,
Absolutely. Yes. How wonderful.
mm.
I wonder what you've been investigating recently in your nature journal.
I think what I've done a lot of lately is doing soundscapes. So, and that idea from John Muir-Laws on doing a soundscape where you're in the center of an area and you're listening to what's in front of you, what's behind you, and see if you can sort of connect with what's close by, what's further away. And even what's in a micro level, what's right in front of you as well. And I just love that activity, so I've been doing that a lot lately. And I think because I find it quite soothing and quite meditative, and at the moment I sort of need that as well. So I'm sort of just following what I feel as though I need for myself, as much as anything. Mm.
Yeah, this sound map idea, I think it came originally from a book called Sharing Nature by Joseph Cornell, I think. But it's a very, very valuable thing to tune into one sense. As you say, it's very meditative to isolate
Mm,
one sense and focus on that and just be present.
mm,
I'm interested I'm interested you've mentioned meditation, you've mentioned, like, present moment awareness, and
mm.
I'm wondering about the head and the heart and um, this balance between science and the heart for you, where you are in that balance.
Yeah, I think as I get older, my heart leads the way much more, I think now. I mean, the science of ecology is still my passion very much, but it's not, as you would know, it's not an easy road either. There's a lot of personal conflict in being an ecologist, and it's hard sometimes. It's not always this lovely being in the fields, watching what nature's doing. Some of it is quite hard and challenging on a personal level.
Mm.
Especially when you're in a government department or something where the the outcomes are different from what you want, sort of thing.
Yes.
So yeah, I think very much um, I'm moving much more closer towards my heart leading the way, and also recognizing that I feel as though I've done a lot to sort of help save the environment with my community. But maybe it's time to sort of step back and take a more personal connection now,
Mm.
um, and let other people take on that role of the scientist, sort of thing. Yeah, so it's become much more personal journey, I think for me, and that connection with nature. It feels like some ways I've gone in a full circle. So for
Mm. Yeah.
when I studied social ecology and had that life changing moment, and now I feel like I'm coming back to that deep ecology very much more, um, now, and I just love it. It warms my heart when I am involved in that, and when I'm sort of focused on that, and to let go of all the eco anxiety that you get when you sort of work in an environmental field.
Yeah, that's interesting. I interviewed an ecologist, an Australian ecologist called Tom Hunt,
Mhm.
some time back, and he mentioned a quote from Aldo Leopold, who's a nature writer. And I can't remember the quote, but basically it says, when you are in this field, when you're an ecologist, when you're an environmental scientist, you know so much that it can be very difficult. You see the worst because you know the destruction that you're witnessing,
Mm.
and I can hear that in your words, that can be really hard. And maybe the nature journal is a way of uh, filling up your cup instead of draining it.
Mm. Yeah, very much. Yeah. It's it's been a good balance, but I think now I need more of that nature
Yeah.
journaling to fill my cup and less of the other.
Yeah. Tell me about your hopes for growing nature journaling in the Hunter region in the future.
Yeah, well, um I'd like to always have it as a club that's sort of open to anyone and everyone, and also accessible, to people. And I would like to also, I'm not sure how yet, but I would like to also learn more from First Nations people on their
Mm.
connection to country and what that means, because um, I have my own feeling of connection with nature, which I don't think is dissimilar to the idea of Indigenous people's connection to country and walking on country. So, just on a personal level, I'd like to explore that more. And I'm lucky through my work, I've actually got wonderful contacts and mentors and elders that I can learn these things from. So, I'm very lucky that I have sort of come across these people that um, yeah, I can learn from and make that part of my nature journaling journey, as well. And I'd also like in the future to make it more accessible somehow to, people that have disabilities or vision impairment or something like that, because um, I've always been blind in one eye, so and I don't know if that makes me see the world in a different light and whether or not my senses are more attuned to nature because of that. But I would like to open it to people with, um, vision impairment or whatever as well, because I think it still can very much be done and very much, um, I'm sure people of all abilities and ages would be able to connect with nature journaling. So I'm not sure how to do that, but I'd like to. I'd like to try and have it more inclusive for people. Yeah, so that's something I just have been thinking about a lot lately, and how would I do that?
Yeah, I love your commitment to making this open and accessible and easy and simple
Mm,
for everybody to get involved with. That's really a wonderful commitment to have.
mm.
And you're doing amazing things. And I'm so appreciative that you came and chatted with me on the podcast today. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been lovely talking to you and yeah, exploring some of the things I haven't thought about for a while. And
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Henrietta.
yeah, thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Henrietta. I really enjoyed hearing the birds joining in the podcast, singing in the background as we spoke. I loved Henrietta's stories about feeling connected to and protected by nature as a child. And I really understand this feeling. I remember my own moments in nature as a young girl and how that felt. It was incredibly powerful. I think that's part of the reason why I begin all my conversations with this question about nature in childhood, because this can be the time when that connection is really sparked. And even if that person loses touch with nature and comes back to it in adulthood, that connection's still there inside us. As Henrietta said, in terms of the deep ecology mindset, it's not about connecting so much as remembering that we have always been connected. We're part of this web of life, and that's unbreakable. I enjoyed listening to Henrietta speak about following what she feels she needs for herself, that if she feels the need for it in a particular time, she'll focus on sensory nature journaling by doing a soundscape or spending time listening to the land in a deep way. I also love that her goal is to make nature journaling accessible to more people. I think that's really important and valuable. Please take the time to look at the show notes where you'll find Henrietta's website and Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. See you next week.